How's the sound? Video seems stuck. Awesome. Well, can you guys see the clock counting down? Is the clock actually counting down? Because right now all I see is the Pro up. There it goes. Apparently I'm having issues with Restream the last couple of times that I tried to set it up, so it's a little nerve-wracking. But let me bring things online here. So I need to looks like I got everything open. Almost ready here. Okay, Today we're going to actually talk about some user issues. So the first one that I want to talk about is somebody asked if their screen was not working. Could I take a look at it? Short answer, yes. Long answer, I don't have the same exact screen, but it uses similar software, so I'll show you on this one. A couple of things you're going to need to configure is how to connect the actual cabling. So over here, I'll show you the back of this. On the back side of this, I have a connection right here. It says 5 volts, ground, RT, TX, and RST. RST is reset. And then there's a similar one that's on this that also has reset, but it's 3.3 volts. So let me see if it lights up on the other one. I doubt it will. But I'll plug it in and apply power. Hopefully we won't see any smoke. So it doesn't power on that one. So you know that that one's not going to be usable. So the other one is this one right here. I marked it with green so I remember which one it is. And then I'm going to connect it up. And it powers up with the latest firmware, not what they loaded in the factory. So right now it says no printer attached. I also need to connect the reset down here. But let's check some stuff real quick. So if you go to menu, settings, and we're going to go to info. Here it says what version you have. In this case, I have the TFT version 3.0.27. And that's as of April 3rd, 2021. So that might be a difference in your configuration. But we still have the issue that it says no printer attached. So there's a other thing that you're going to need to look at. Right now the firmware is not loaded for it. So I'm going to show you what the settings are. So inside here for connection, one of the things you're going to need to look at is baud rate. Right now mine's set to 250,000 bits. Keep in mind that I actually set it when I loaded the firmware last time, being I think Monday. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Monday live stream will help you understand that. So now that we know that and we still see no printer attached, I'm going to show you how to do this real quick, and I'll check on the chat in just a second. So I'm going to pop out the card and I'm going to place it in here, and then I'm going to place it inside my computer. So we're going to go over to VS Code, and inside VS Code we're going to, hang on, let me get it in front of me so you can see. Just 2 seconds, I need to make a minor mod here. Apparently my screen likes to scramble every time I power cycle the computer, so here we go. So to load it, you're going to click on the Explorer, open folder, then you're going to go to your downloads folder if that's where you downloaded it. And in this case I have 2 things unzipped. I have the bug fix because I was doing some research, and I also have the Marlin. So I'll show you what the folder looks like real quick. So right here you can see that I unzipped both. So back in here I'm going to select Marlin 2.0, Marlin 2.0, select folder. Now to set this up, it's really quick. So all you have to do is go to Marlin configuration.h, but before you do that you need to grab what your board type is. So you're going to go to source core boards.h. You're going to search on GTR underscore, and that'll bring you to your board type. I know this is basic information, but I always go over it just in case somebody hasn't seen it before. And I'm going to go to configuration.h, search on motherboard, paste it over the ramps, and then we have to set the first serial port to -1, and the second one we need to remove the comment, and we're going to change this to the number 3. Now, if you're using it for Wi-Fi, this might vary. I don't know what happens yet because I haven't tried both Wi-Fi and the screen. So now that that's set up, we need to set up platformio.ini. So we're going to go over here. And the Mega 2560 is not our chipset, so we'll search on GTR underscore again, and it'll bring us to our default environment. So I'll copy that, go back up to the top, and I'll paste it over that. Then to compile, before you do it, click the garbage can to clean out your previous build because there might be something there. Then you're going to click the checkbox. And this may take a moment. If you get an error, always go to the very first error that you see and then see what that says, because that might be a clue. The other ones might be a cascade of errors that occur because of the first one. Usually it's a fat finger, which means you accidentally hit a key or removed a comment where it shouldn't be. But we'll get to that in just a second. So this is successful. To load it, in this case, for this type of board, you're going to go to .pio, Big Tree Tech, for the GTR version 1.0. You're going to find firmware.bin. You're going to right click, say reveal in File Explorer. Then you're going to right click again and send it to your D drive. In this case, this is the drive that I have connected to the computer. And as you can see, earlier I loaded something, so we have 559, and then we have 606, which is firmware.bin. That's what we're loading. This is what was loaded. That's why it's in all capital letters, and the extension has changed to cur. If you wanted to reload this, instead of this, you'd rename this to this, just so you know. So I'm going to pop this out, go back over to the workbench, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to pop this out, place this in the drive with the power off. I have USB set for the jumper. Normally when you're using steppers, it's going to be on the other two, but this is so I can power the board with USB. So I'm going to plug this in and plug this in, and then watch the TFT display for a second, and it's gone. So that's how you fix that problem. So I had another viewer ask a question. I'll check on the chat before I do that. So let's see. Based on the SKR Pro, but I have no problems with leveling. So I'm trying to figure out what this is. Keep in mind. Oh, okay. It's a little bit of humor. Okay, so I'm going to go back and change this setup real quick because someone asked about the MKS. Let me check on what that was. I have to go to the main chat real quick. I'm checking my Discord channel, which I think is in the description. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to the general chat to see what questions were. So in here, let's see. Followed your instructions for the MKS sGen basic video. I'm wondering if that is for the version 1 or 2, but he gave me a file, so I'm going to download that. Hopefully that'll download real quick. And I'm going to open that up. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but that's okay. Let me just go over to the chat for a second. Basically, I just clicked on this to download. So now I'm going to actually go over to where the file is, and it says error. So that might be that he named it error. So we're going to search on motherboard just to see what's going on. Let's see, here's what I did. Okay, so this might not give me a lot of information. This looks like it's the output. Let me see if the file's in there as well. So I'm going to go back to Discord for a second. I thought it was the file, so it's my fault here. So here's the file. So I'm going to download that real quick. And then we'll go and see what the config looks like. So we have configuration.h. I'm going to search on motherboard. This is just so I know which one to pull out of the package and use. So it's V2. So that's the version 2 of the motherboard. So let me clean up the desk real quick here. So power this down, move this out of the way. Clean up my mess underneath. And then I gotta get the sticky stuff so I can use it for the next board. Put this one away. Let's see. And then find the MakerBase board. So for MakerBase, it's version 2. There's version 1. So let's see if I've got version 2 here. Yep. So here's the version 2 board. It's been a while since I've worked with it, so I got to look at it for a second. So as you can tell, there's a jumper on the UART that doesn't need to be there at the moment because we're not using UART. And there's another jumper over here that I'm just going to pop off because we're not actually going to be working with the steppers at this moment. There we go. So I don't see any other jumpers on the board. In fact, this is the wrong board. I grabbed the MKS Gen L version 2. So let me look for it again. Here it is. So that's the board. Let me just put them side by side so you can see the difference. Because this will cause errors if you load a 32-bit version with an 8-bit or an 8-bit with a 32. That's a common issue a lot of people run into, but I'm assuming that's not the case because they set the chipset. So now that I got that done, I'm going to put this back down so I can see it. There we go. I'm going to plug it in for a second just to see what happens, and we'll probably hear a beep. And then we'll see something on our computer, so we'll check that in Device Manager. So I just plugged it in. As you can see, it's powering up. There's a drive in there right now, so we might see it. So let's see what happens when we go to the desktop. So on the desktop, I'm gonna do Device Manager. Open that up, and of course it pops up on the other screen. And first thing I want to look at is COM ports just to see if they're there. So it's COM port 10 because this is your normal default one on your computer. So we know it shows up as a COM port. Now what we want to do is see if there's a hidden drive here that will show up. And I forgot what it's called because I almost never look. So it says Marlin Card 01 USB device. So we know that's working. So let's close this down. We'll go over to the file folder. We'll click on the D drive because we no longer had one in there. And this one has firmware.cur on it that was from 3/15/2021. So that is functional. So one of the issues that can occur is that there's an issue where you've got the drive formatted possibly incorrect. I'll point that out real quick. So if you go to Format, make sure that it's FAT32 and that these are the defaults. This is actually an 8 gigabyte drive. You can actually use smaller ones like 120 megabit, but in this case I'm just going to format it real quick, or at least I hope I am. Of course, formatting it when it's inside the other device doesn't work. So I may have just screwed something up, but we'll find out. So I'm going to pop the drive out because I may have broken it. So you obviously couldn't see what I just did, but I tried to format in the folder in the drive for the D drive. So let me bring that up again. I'm just going to put the drive back in because I don't think it formatted, and power it up, and we'll see what happens on the screen. So it did come up, so it didn't allow it to format. It did allow me to delete the files. So I'm going to remove this, and I'll show you what I'm doing because I'm just popping out the drive, and I'm going to load it manually. So I'm going to first format the drive. This should be okay to do in most cases. Slide that in there, place it in your computer. You can also load it directly, but I know when there's issues, this is the way to recover it. So I'm going to go over to my desktop. I'm going to bring up a folder. I'm going to first check on the drive if it shows up, which it should. There it is. Hang on a second. Okay, so I may have damaged my drive, or it renamed it to E. Okay, so as you can see, that's a great way to damage your drive. I know the drive still works. So what I'm going to try and do is put it back in and see if I can load it on the system first. Then if this doesn't work, I'll change it to another drive and we'll recover it that way. So I'm going to pop this back in here because I know there's good firmware on here and I want to see if it works. So it's powering up, and then we'll check on the computer's desktop. It just said depopulated. So we know there's a drive there. So I'm going to close this and go over to VS Code. VS Code, we need to actually back out of our changes because I don't want to reload it. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to hit Control Z, bring it back to what it was, do the same thing over here. Okay, so let's go over to, hang on, I got to minimize some folders because there's a little bit of mess here. Source, core, boards.h. I'm going to search on MKS _ sGen _V2, I think. I might be wrong. It's Gen L. Whoops. _V2. There we go. I'm going to highlight that, copy it. I'm going to go over to the motherboard real quick. Or excuse me, over to configuration.h. We're already at motherboard, so I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to change this to -1. And then I'm going to do the chipset, but in order to know what the chipset is, I'm going to go back over to boards.h. And it says that it's an LPC 1769. So I'm going to minimize this, go over to platformio.ini, paste it over the default chipset. I'm going to have to do a clean real quick here. Of course, it doesn't like the clean very much. So let's try build. And it really doesn't like that. So I may have screwed something up in this configuration because it doesn't want to clean. So first step, I'm going to go back over to the desktop for a second. I'm going to disconnect the power. Then I'm going to hit clean in VS Code again. And it doesn't want to do it. So I've got a couple of issues here. Looks like there's something running still. So I'm going to see if I can trash the task. Trash it again. And it really doesn't like that. So it says unknown environment, MKS Gen L. So it's trying to figure out what's going on. I know that's not correct. That's why it's unknown environment. So it's LPC 1768. See what happens when I do something wrong? So I'm going to plug back in the USB again. It's fun to watch me make mistakes. Give it a second to connect, transition back over. We're going to hit clean again. Hopefully it'll be nice this time. Then we'll hit the checkbox. So this is just checking to see if it builds. Notice how we got build errors. So it's LPC 1769, I believe, but we can double check that by going over to source core boards.h, and it's 69. So we're good there. So let's go back and hit the checkbox. It might fail again, or might not. It takes me a second to get up to speed on the different boards when I start swapping them around. I'll check on the chat while this is going on. Yeah, I know, you guys were screaming the board name while I was trying to figure out what was going on and I couldn't see it. I've got to get a third screen one of these days. So, let's see. Now that that's complete, let's try doing an upload. And now it says there's a problem with the port. This might be caused by me, but let's see what it says. It says, please specify upload port for environment or use global upload port. So let's try it a second time. Still doesn't work. So let's go back over to, well, I'm guessing I destroyed the drive, so let's see what happens here. So I'm going to transition back over. I'm going to pop out the drive. I'm going to try one last time to see if it recovers. It probably won't because I've done something funky to it. Put that in the computer, go to the desktop. It says there's a drive, so let's click on it. So there's a D drive and there's nothing on it. So let's see if we can get away with recovery on here. So what I'm going to do is actually do this. I'm going to go over to VS Code, click on .pio, LPC 1769, find the file, right click, reveal in File Explorer. I'm going to right click again and send to the D drive. Then we'll check the D drive to make sure it's okay. Looks like there's a file, that's good. So we'll close out of that. We'll go back over to the workbench. I'll pop out the drive, pull this, stick it in here, and then we'll see what happens. So it says there's a D drive. So let's click on it. And it says firmware.cur. That's one way to recover. Another is to get a different drive, reformat the drive, a bunch of different things. For some reason, it got all funky on me. Let me check on the chat, see if anybody else has opinions. Yeah, so that's the first thing you can check. There are other ways to upgrade it. I would suggest first doing it at several times this way. But let's look at the config file and see if we can decipher what's going on. So I'm going to go into VS Code real quick. I'm going to back out of all the changes. Well, actually, I'm going to see if it loads from here now. So now that it's connected, let's try doing a file upload. So it looks like it worked. So the way you can confirm is you can actually go over to your desktop. Sorry, I don't want to move too fast here. And you can see now it says firmware.cur and firmware.bin. Essentially the same size. So you know it's loading. If you unplug it and plug it back in, it should go to firmware.cur in capital letters. So let me grab that file from the downloads folder. And I'm going to unzip a second one right here. So let me grab this. And I'm going to show you how to look with file compare to see if there's an issue. So I'm going to extract this real quick. Apparently not as quick as I thought. Might be time for me to get a second SSD because this is getting a little bit slow. I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Okay, apparently I got an issue with my extract. Oh, it's because I have 2 and it's trying to overwrite the 1. So let me kill this for a second, or maybe it'll have the file in here. So I actually have to go into here real quick and close this, and I'll just back out all my changes real quick with a Control Z. So you notice how the serial port's back to what it was, and I'm going to change the INI back to what it was. Then I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to close it. Save the configuration. Now I'm going to minimize this for a second. I'm going to go back to downloads, and I'm going to rename configuration.h to something different. So rename, and we'll call this issue. That way I can do a file compare. So I'm in here, I need to go to here, and then the config file that we're looking for is right here. So I'm going to go back to downloads, I'm going to copy this file, and then navigate down to that folder. This is a technique I use when I make mistakes, which obviously you get to see all the time. So now I'm going to take this, and I have SVN loaded so I can do a diff. And what it looks like over here is that we can see the differences. So config.h is me, and then whatever was changed over here looks like it was an example for deltas. Then we have the serial port looks correct. The second serial port, not sure, it's not being used, so it doesn't matter. MKS Gen L V2, that looks correct. And then custom machine name. So this looks mostly correct. So I'm gonna do a little trick here. I'm gonna actually close out of this for a second and see if I can recreate the issue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to rename this new. And I'm going to rename this to the actual name of it. And then I'm going to go back into VS Code and reload it. So I'm going to go to File Explorer. Then I'm going to go to Open Folder, Downloads, 2.0, 2.0, select folder. We'll double check to see if the changes are there. Obviously platform.io.ini is not the same, but we'll peek at the other one in a second. So configuration.h, we have -1. We have the actual board type. We have DeltaBot for the name of it. So let me check to see what the other file is. So I'm going to go over to GitHub for a second, grab the platform.io.ini. And it wants me to confirm that I want to pull it down. So let's go back over here, go to downloads, and we're just going to peek inside. And that looks correct, so we'll copy that. Otherwise we could copy the whole file in there, but that's okay. So let's go to VS Code, platform.io.ini. We'll paste it here. We'll hit compile, even though we're not going to do a clean first. And so far, so good. Oh, there's an error. So, let's do a clean first. Let's do a build again. This may fail a second time. Then we'll do a second compile, see if that fixes it. And by the way, clean basically removes the files that are in here. That's so you can do a fresh build. It uses it for saving memory, but you can do it a second time. So it built. So there's nothing wrong with it from this end, but what I'll show you over here is what happens with clean. So if you go to build and you look in these files, you'll see all this stuff here. So watch what happens when you hit clean. Now let's go back over to this folder, and there's nothing. So that's what clean does. It basically whacks everything that you once were working with for your build so that you can rebuild it. So I hope that helps. That might be the compiler issue, is that the little garbage can wasn't being used first, then build, or build twice. So let's see. I don't think your TFT card is bad, or your SD card. I think it's a build issue. Oh, you lost the connection to your drive? If you lost connection to your motherboard, what you can do is drop the file back on the card and then reload. So does that work for you? Or you want to try that while we take other questions and see what happens? Okay, well, let me show you guys some stuff real quick here. I've been busy this week building a web page just so that you can actually look up the tutorials easier. So I'm going to bring those up on a web page here. So it's called www.edwardbremen.com. The reason that I named it this was not really out of narcissism. It had more to do with, originally when I started making YouTube videos, I didn't think people were going to watch, and now apparently 75,000 views a month. I have no choice but to use it. So maybe I'll rename it eventually to Ed's 3D Printing, but I haven't gotten around to that. So it's still under construction. Apparently I wasn't thinking of cell phones when I wrote this, but it's designed more for a cell phone. If you go over to playlist, you can see each one of my playlists. I try and show people what to do and in what order. It's taking a second to load here. Your platform IO should be good. Try a clean first, then a build. So as you can see, I try and put them in the order that I actually filmed them, or you might want to try things in this order. That way it's you're not going to know what's going on if something breaks unless you go through each one of these. Okay, so essentially it's just filming in order. Did the same thing for the SKR. Originally when I recorded this, the SKR had Atom as the plugin, or excuse me, the plugin VS Code, or not VS Code, the plugin for Platform IO went into Atom, but Atom's become highly unstable. That's why I recorded a new video. But essentially the steps are exactly the same. It's just you have a different IDE, which is an integrated developer environment. I also have the SKR Pro that you can find here, and then I have a lot of older stuff. So some of the stuff might be central to the MKS sGen, except the loading is different. And so my really old tutorials obviously don't have thumbnails because I didn't think people were watching, but I learned that lesson very quickly. If people want to learn how to use OpenSCAD, I also have tutorials here on the basics of using it. And if you've noticed, there is actually a place where I put my my actual material for designs up here. This will take you to Thingiverse, to my page, and allow you to see the different builds that I have. So in here you can see that this is actually built with OpenSCAD, so you can see how I structured it. You might want to change it. I mean, essentially I haven't looked at this in a very long time, but let's see if we can download it. Obviously I can't tip myself. 2 seconds here. Apparently it doesn't like me downloading from myself. Let's see if I can find it. And if you haven't noticed, there's actually a printer design or two in here someplace. I like to do things squares most of the time unless I need to do a rounded edge. But here you can find the source code to OpenSCAD. Whoops, I'm trying to tip myself. That's awesome. So if I save this, it'll show up someplace, sometime, but let's go over to the downloads folder. So in the downloads folder, apparently I didn't get creative with the names, so I'm gonna extract this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I actually went to high school, the same high school as Chadwick Boseman. Whoops, that's the STL, so that's not going to be helpful. Whoops, that's the chat. I also went to the same high school as Jenna Marbles and Kristen Wiig, for anybody that really wants to know weird trivia. Also the same as Xena, Warrior Princess's sidekick. So apparently I can't find the file. I thought it was in here, but I know there's a file floating out there that's actually an STL, so I'm kind of clueless on my own stuff. Awesome. And also Chadwick and I wrestled on the same high school wrestling team, just different times. So this actually is in VS Code, or excuse me, in OpenSCAD. So if you download it, I gotta wait a second here. Yeah, 8 gigabits should be fine for you. You might have to rename it, or excuse me, reformat it with FAT32. So let's see if this is here. So there it is. So I extract this. This should be quick. This will show you what it actually looks like, hopefully. There it is. So inside VS Code, you can see how I designed it. It's very simple, but the tutorials will walk you through how each one of these things is used. And this is what it actually looks like. This is one of my very first tutorials on just how to make the bed sync up better with pillow blocks. So now that I've gone off on a tangent, does anybody have any questions so I don't keep getting more tangential? I do want to show you, let's see, there is the supporting the channel. I have PayPal and what is it, Patreon? I'm gonna add more eventually, but right now obviously it's very, very prototyped. I like to do things very slowly, but I built most of this in here for you so you can go through different tutorials and learn different things. These are very old, like this one. This is my very first tutorial series. So a lot of technology has changed since then. but a lot of this will work, except for like steppers are different. Just keep that in mind that you have to uncomment steppers. When I did this, I think it was 1.1.6 for Marlin's firmware version. It might be 1.1.8, but in 1.1.9 they changed it where you had to uncomment your steppers. So now that I've gone off on a tangent, okay, FAT32 means file access table, and it's 32 bits. So 32 is the size, and file access table is FAT. I hope that makes sense. Okay, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well, everyone remember to like and subscribe, and I will be on tomorrow at, oh, you couldn't see anything I'm doing, or is it frozen? No. I can't tell if my stream is frozen on my side or if you can see what's going on. But apparently, my stream is frozen on my side, which is super weird. So, can you see the actual stuff that I just showed you, or is it totally blank? Which screen do you guys see on the stream? I know there's a slight delay between me asking the question and you answering it, but apparently my dashboard has me still on my table instead of on a website. Okay, well, let me check on myself. Well, it says I'm live, and it looks right. Okay, well, sorry you had to hear that. It's just me talking to myself, apparently. So down below, there's also links to each one of my tutorial playlists. So apparently I went paste happy on it, so sorry about that. I'll clean that up in a minute. But yeah, at the moment I'm not moving on the website. I was actually looking on another screen to see what's going on, but I can scroll here. On my computer, what I'm seeing is can you see the movement? It might be 8 seconds after I say it. As long as you can hear my voice. Yeah, it takes a second for what I do on my side to reach you. But I can go to a different playlist real quick here. There you go. Apparently I don't remember what this is, but I'll probably take that out so it's not making a mess, or it's something I haven't released yet, which is possible. Yeah, I'm scrolling around just to make sure it works. I'll show you what's going on my side. This is what I'm seeing for the stream right now, is that I'm frozen. That's why I'm nervous. But on your side, it should look all good, which is super weird. It might be a Streamlab issue. Yeah, it gets kind of weird on my side. Every time I set it up, it seems to want to not start the stream. So I have to try and start it different ways each time. So I have to either start streaming, then hit on, or I have to start with it off. it varies with my restream. But we're getting a couple people in here, so let me see if I've got more questions that came up the other day. So I'm going to read through some of the questions that I might have had in YouTube. I have to see what they are here. So let's see. I'm obviously not going to read how awesome my own stream is, because I'm hypercritical of it, so I'll avoid that. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked if they could do 24 volts on a Ramps 1.6. The answer is yes, and maybe I can show you, but I'm going to have to move some stuff around. So I'm actually going to move back over to the desktop so you can see what I'm doing. So over here, I'm going to pop this out for a second. I actually have to grab a power supply, so give me a second to do that. I also might have to grab a Ramps 1.6 if I don't have one immediately available. Apparently I have a bad habit of buying every single board almost known to man, but a lot of the help for that has come from everybody viewing. So I've got a Ramps 1.4, but I gotta go find the other one. I'll just let you look at that for a second. And then I'll figure out if I buried it down here or not. Let's see. I think this one's a Smart Ramps, or it's a Ramps 1.4. But there's no writing on it, so I have to assume it's Ramps 1.4. You don't want the green one for anything if you can avoid it. I think it's in the other room. Let me go see if I can grab it. Okay, this is either a 1.5 or a 1.6, but the premise is still the same. So there's the board. Right now I have power supplies for both 12 volts, so I gotta pull one out and grab a different one. So essentially you gotta fix this. Notice how I make big labels on them? That's because sometimes I accidentally cook things. So I need to pop these out, and I have to be careful of what I'm taking out. So I'm just gonna take out one to start, or I'm gonna take out, yeah, this one. This I don't do tutorials on because it varies country by country, so I avoid it. And then I need a connection for it. So as you can see, I use ferrule connectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this one first. as I get a bigger screwdriver. I'm going to insert this one first. Then I'm going to insert this one. Okay, now that I got that fixed, I'll point out yet again that I do ferrule connectors because there's a safety issue with not using them where you could cook your equipment. So I'll move this over. I'll find the board again, and the power goes in here. I believe it's 12 or 24 volt tolerant. Notice how I put a red mark for each one of these. That is voltage. So I'm going to remove the screw a little, then slide it in, and then tighten it down. Obviously now you know why I use the putty when I do tutorials. So let me stick some underneath real quick so this doesn't look so sloppy. There we go. So the power is connected, but the power is not plugged in, because I'm going to check the power real quick here. So give me a second to look at that, and I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Thanks for the super chat. It's greatly appreciated. So let me go over to the web browser so you can see what I'm doing. So inside here, I'm going to search on ramps 1.6. And I'm going to go to the ramps RepRap page. We'll scroll through this kind of quick. As you can see, it says 12 or 35 VDC. That means it's tolerant up to 35 volts. Don't try it. Only go as high as 24. And that's because, as you've seen in the past, I've cooked my boards, or at least one board. So let's go back over to the bench and see if it actually powers up safely. If I make a mistake, you'll see smoke. So this is just to power it up. So I'm going to plug it in. And as you can see, it's powered. There's no smoke rising from it. We can verify the power real quick with a multimeter, as long as we're careful. I usually don't like doing this while it's live. I'm trying to find a way so you can see what I'm doing. So let's start with that. Now I've got very tiny probes on this. If you want, I'll put affiliate links in the description to make life easier. But this goes to ground. This goes to voltage. As you can see, it's 24 volts. Now we can test it if you want by installing a stepper in it, but essentially that is a yes on the answer of 24 volts is tolerant on this board. The ramps 1.4 will basically smoke if you do that. So let me unplug this as my tripod wants to roll over. There we go. So that's one of the questions I had this week. Let me see if I can find the answer to other ones. That one's not there anymore. Okay, I already covered the TFT28, so that's not going to be interesting. Let's see. The baud rate's supposed to be 115/200 for the board. there is no pin map for the V14 Turbo. Use 1728. Use V14. Change the ID boards missing, libraries. Okay. So I don't know if this is related to a previous question, but on the ramps, or excuse me, SKR 1.4, what they're asking is this. Over here, for the ramps 1.4, they want to know if the baud rate needs to be lower. You can lower it if you want, but considering that your printer board can handle this baud rate for almost all of them except for the really old ones, like the ramps would probably be 115 to 100 and below, you can actually do 250,000. I don't know about the ramps, but we can always try that out right now. So what I need to do is actually change this back to 0. It's been a while since I've done this, like 2 weeks. Go over to here, source core boards, search on ramps underscore V1 underscore 6, I think. This one's going to be a fun one because I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head how this goes. It's ramps 1.6, so we're going to copy what they're doing on the ramps 1.4 maybe. There we go. So it should look like that. That's what I got, but let's see what happens. Technically, you can use the 1.4. Actually, it's not copying correctly. Or it is, sorry. That's SKR. Silly me. So that is a different board. This is actually a 32-bit processor, so sorry for the confusion. It's going to be up here. It's at Mega 2560, I believe. Or 18 Mega, sorry. So this would be a board you could use for it. Essentially, the pinouts are exactly the same. That's why I'm saying that. But they may not have mapped it in here. So I'll show you why this is true. The actual power supply doesn't matter. So if we were to go over to a browser, you can see we'll just pick some pins at random over here. Let me just zoom in. As you can see, like up here, you got 21, 20, ground, and V5. So everything on this board is exactly the same. So I'm going to go over to the ramps 1.4 and search on that same issue. So let me reset this back to the normal size and change this to 1.4. And let's see what we got. So the pinouts are showing up over here. It's for the Mega 20, or excuse me, for the ramps 1.4, 21, 20, ground, and 5 volts. So essentially these are exactly the same. It's just they changed the power handling over here. And I don't know why they're saying it's 12 or 25 volts here. That is not correct. It should be 12 volts, period. There should be no 24 volts, but that's odd to me. Unless they made a change recently and I just don't know it. Which is highly possible, but here's a picture of somebody telling you the same thing that I'm saying right here. So that should be a key not to use 24 volts on this board. It's always 12. But on the other one, it's 24 for the ramps 1.6. But let me show you how to load the firmware. Great. I know you can't see what I'm talking about. Sorry about that. It says 24 volts here, or 12 volts here. That's for the ramps 1.4. But if you go over here, they mistakenly say that it's 12 or 24 volts. It's not. It's 12. This one, being the ramps 1.6, let me pull it up actually. The 1.6 is 12 or 35 volts, meaning 12 or 24 volts. This has a different power handling scheme, whereas the other one doesn't. So let's try and load the firmware real quick here. So I'm going to grab this one for EFB. EFB stands for Extruder Fan Bed. It's been forever since I've done a tutorial on this or even loaded it, so this might get interesting. If you go over to advanced configuration.h and you paste in your board, you're set to 0. We need to connect to the board, so I'm going to go over to the desktop real quick. And then we'll go back over to VS Code. Inside here, we're going to test this originally. So let's go over to Config Advanced. Let's hit Control Z, bring it back to the chipset that it's using, being the Mega 2560, which is on the Arduino Uno. Or, yeah, not Arduino Uno, sorry, the Mega 2560 for the Arduino. So now that that's set, I'm going to hit Clean, and then I'm going to see if I can do an upload. This might turn out interesting. It might fail the first time. It's been a while since I've done this. And I'll check on the chat while that's going on. Yeah, sorry about that. Every once in a while I get off on a tangent and forget to switch the screens. But as you can see, it's now loading. It loads differently. This is an 8-bit processor. So it has to send a code saying get ready to load, and then it loads a particular way, so it's loading a file. So this is basically a timer saying what's going on. I don't want to get into too much detail on microprocessors because even for me it's hard to explain. Let's see, I have a question. The SKR Pro1.x. How do I connect the BLTouch because the board has BLTouch connector? There's a couple of issues with that. Their BLTouch connection on the board, I'll bring up the diagram. They've got the order kind of messed up, but I'll show you in a second. So that loaded. I don't think there's an actual issue here, but it looks like it flashed fine. So let's just power it up real quick and then I'll show you the SKR. So I'm going to go over to the workbench, then I'm going to bring up Pronterface so you can see this as soon as it shows up. Hang on a second here. There we go. So in Pronterface, I'm just going to power it up. Hopefully we won't see any smoke and my computer won't blink out. So powered up. Now let's try connecting, but we don't know what to connect to. So I'm going to go to Device Manager. And you can't see what I'm doing yet, so let me bring that up so you can see it. So inside Device Manager, we're going to check to see what COM port we have. So we'll go to COM ports. It's 23. And I can tell that because of the chipset. I'll show you in a second why that is. Right here, the CH340, that's the chipset for the USB serial communications. So I'm going to connect. It says that it's online. We don't see any smoke. It does say something about EEPROM mismatch, but I'd have to check that. It also seems to think that it's got a different firmware on it. It might be that I loaded the settings for, what is it, the TMC 2209s because I swapped. So let's go take a look real quick here. So if we go over here and I go to, I'm just picking out what the issue is, just so you know why I'm saying this. If I search on A4988, this is why it's saying low, because it thinks these are connected. But that's fine. It's not going to do any damage at the moment. There is a special configuration for this one that I don't want to get into that involves resistors. So I'm going to avoid talking about that. But let's get back to the question about the board for the SKR 1.4. So I'm going to unplug this, give it a second to discharge because there's some capacitance in the system. Now that it's discharged and the light's off on the power supply, I'm going to then disconnect these. This is me just trying to be safe because it's not interesting if I'm crying out in pain during a stream. Let me clean this up. And let me get some of the stuff out of the way. And I'll pull out the SKR board in just a second. So SKR made a mistake when they were building their boards. For the several of them, they reversed their pins. So here's the SKR 1.1 for the SKR Pro. Let me make sure it doesn't slide around. And then I'll point out what the issue is. Sorry, the putty's starting to get warm, so it's harder to work with. Okay, so inside here, there is going to be connectors for the BLTouch and also for the servo. So I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Here's the BLTouch. These are version dependent now, apparently. So you have two sets of wires. You have a set of wires for the servo connection. So you have brown, I think it's red, and then yellow. It might look orange to you. Those are ground, voltage, and signal. And then over here you have black and white. Black is ground, white is signal. So let's pull up the diagram for this real quick. Hang on, I gotta get the browser actually working. So we're gonna search on BTT GitHub SKR Pro 1.1. So hopefully this takes us to GitHub. Inside here, we're gonna go and search on repositories because I don't trust where I was. SKR Pro. Click over here. It's not the 1.2. So we're gonna find the manual. We're gonna open this up. Now I'd go directly to the pinout diagram, but I want you to see what's going on. So I have to scroll down. This might make you a little dizzy. Right here, they show you how the connections look. So it says 5 volts, then it says PA, then it says ground, then it says PA. Very confusing. So what they're doing is, you can see there's nothing connected right here for the ground, and they're using the ground that runs through. So what I would do to hook this up, which makes it confusing, is go over to the workbench. This is what they're showing you to do. They're saying take this, find the pins. There's only 4 of them, so it's going to take me a second to find them. I think they're right. Well, let me look it up on the pinout diagram because I think I'm in the wrong space. So I'm going to go back over to the browser for a second. I'm going to go back, find the pin diagram. This helps me locate where things are on the board. And then I'm going to look for BLTouch. And you see how there's 4 pins? So that's where it's located, just behind the USB connection. So it's right here. So I'll show you what they're doing. they're saying hook it up, take this, and let those 2 pins or 1 pin overhang, push it down. And then they're saying do the same for the signal pin, but there's no overhang in this case, so it's black. That's what they're telling you to do. So on this board, that's the issue, is that this ground is not connected. As for the configuration, I don't want to go into that because it can get very long very quick. I will be making a tutorial eventually on it. Right now, there's a lot of detail, but essentially if you enable BLTouch, you don't have to enable servo anymore. It's similar to my older directions, but different. So I think you have to now set a bunch of little things that I have to actually look at my notes for, because I've been actually working on it. But it can go off in 2 different directions with the LCD versus the touchscreen display. And that's one of the reasons I actually have to do more research, because there's 2 different sets of actions that you can take, one with the display and one with the touchscreen, and they're very different. So I want to get all that as right as possible before I talk about it. So let me check on the chat real quick here. Yes, behind the Wi-Fi connector. I personally have opinions about the BLTouch. One is I don't use it anymore, and the rationale for that is if you level your bed with a switch end stop, it's easier to do. Most beds are level. There are very few cases when you need to actually use a BLTouch. If your bed is not level and you use a BLTouch, all you're doing is putting more strain on your motors, so it's easier to replace the bed. But that's my opinion. I know that other people want to use it because they seem to think it's convenient. But I try and stay or steer you clear of things that I probably would not use. And BLTouch I used briefly a long time ago and found that it was not for me. Okay, so I think that's answered a couple of questions tonight. We're coming up on 7:15. Does anybody else have any other questions now that we're gone? What is it? An hour and 15 minutes so far? Let's see. Do I need to steal, or do I need to use the Z-min end stop? I'm not sure I understand the question. I think you're asking what kind of end stop to use. Or are you talking about a capacitive or inductive sensor? For steel, you can use inductive, I believe, because it will detect the ferrous metal in your table, but I believe that your bed will also be detected with aluminum. It just won't be as good. I do have aluminum beds around here someplace, but I have to retest it. I think it does work. I received the question. Oh, someone's asking you what the question is, or how to ask the question. Yeah, I try and explain as best I can. This is rather expensive now, being the BLTouch. That's one of the reasons I don't use it anymore. I actually have probably 6 of them. When they changed the firmware and the configuration, I spent a lot of time and money buying more of these to see if it was just maybe I had a bad one. But also I haven't used these in years. Some of the things you need to know is that you might have to set something in advanced configuration. It does a double tap when it goes down, so it'll tap, it'll back off and try and tap again. If you don't know about that, you're going to have to tap it twice with your finger if you use it. That's one of the reasons that I stopped using it. It's because I didn't know about the double tap for a long time, but I do know about it now. That can cause the firmware to crash on your microprocessor. It's not a bad crash, it just won't work after that until you reboot. If you need to set a servo up on this, remember that the pins are all over the place, so you might have to use jumper wires to actually use them. So, you know, what was it, voltage signal? So that means you're going to have to find a ground someplace else on the board, and there's lots of ground pins that you can plug into. And by the way, the ramps, one of the reasons I liked it so much for so many years, it's got 4 sets of servo pins. So it's got a rail for power, a rail for ground, and then signal pins all across. That's one of the reasons I like this board. Also, you have other signal pins that are exposed. It's got the most pins for the amount of money that you would spend. That's why I like this board and have upwards of, I think, 8 of them. I have a lot of print hours on this board. As for other boards, I do have a lot of print hours, just not as many as that. Well, eventually when you can take a boat across the lake, I'll give you one, but right now, I think I try not to expose my address, obviously, for obvious reasons like you guys. I'm kind of personal, but obviously I live on the other side of the lake from Toronto. We used to have a fast ferry in between, for those that don't know. So I'm gonna wrap this up because we're an hour and 17 minutes in, unless more questions come in. Because for me to scan through my questions from the week, I didn't track them like I normally do. But there are a lot of different questions that came up. I'm trying to see if there's some interesting ones. I could, but I prefer a little bit of privacy. It's just one of those things. Once you start YouTubing and live streaming, part of your life is personal. That's why you never see a window. But that's just the way I am. Yeah, I'm waiting on 2 things to arrive. I can't tell you what they are yet, but once you see a bunch of tutorials pop up, you'll know what I ordered. I may put them up on Patreon first, because there's 2 people up there that have subscribed very recently and surprised me, so I want to give them something special to watch before everybody else. Plus, it won't be available in certain aspects until Marlin makes changes to their firmware. So I might just talk about the board first, explain what's on it, and then I'll go from there. So everyone, be safe. I know Toronto's having some lockdown issues right now. Be safe, get your shot when you can. And I know what the lockdowns feel like, because we've gone through them several times already. And hopefully in another 2 weeks, I'll have my shot again for my second one. So take care, be safe, and I'll catch up with you all later.